Cat finds abandoned baby, owners can't explain her reaction. They couldn't help but be worried when they heard the desperate cat's cries. They sounded too adamant for there to be nothing worth concern about. She realized the cat was asking for help when she saw the cat standing nearby the baby. The baby had been left alone in the garden and the cat had been trying to get the attention of someone who would help. But things were not as they seemed. It wasn't an easy fix. Cats can be loyal to their home and owners more than people ever thought possible. Perhaps this is why one curious cat couldn't walk away when she heard a strange noise. Kiki, the cat, knew she had to do something to help because someone was clearly in distress. The thought of running away and charging in the opposite direction of the crying didn't even cross her mind. Kiki knew she couldn't leave the scene. Instead, she knew she had to help in one way or another. As a resident of Oslo, Norway, Sam had spent a huge part of his life living in a large home surrounded by many of his friends and acquaintances. But not all of the residents were human. The area was also home to a cat named Kiki, who took up residence in the entrance hall. People believed that Kiki first made her way into the house a few years back and loved it so much that she didn't want to leave. Sam was the one the cat seemed to visit the most, although everyone in the neighborhood cared for the cat as if they were her owners. One morning Sam noticed that Kiki hadn't touched her food. After calling for her for a while, he realized that the cat had disappeared or something must have happened to her. At first, he looked for Kiki by himself and even asked the people in the area if they saw her. There was no sign of her. It wouldn't take long before the cat reappeared, starting a chain of events that shook the entire neighborhood. Kiki lived a perfect life in that house for around 3 years before something upset her daily antics. Kiki was a relatively quiet cat and kept to herself, which is why the surrounding residents were so surprised and upset to hear Kiki crying and meowing at the top of her lungs. One particular resident thought Kiki was being harmed somehow and immediately left his apartment to see what was going on. The man who first heard Kiki ran outside in the garden to find her and was quickly followed by someone else. The resident wasn't the only one to hear Kiki's intense meow. Sam also heard the piercing noise from his house and knew something was wrong. Kiki was such a huge part of his life that he just couldn't imagine how he would feel if she was hurt or injured. So Sam followed the other resident and made his way outside to find her sitting there and making weird noises. Then the two realized something was terribly wrong. The two men realized that Kiki wasn't alone. They stared at each other for a few seconds while they took in the scene in front of them. There was Kiki in the spot she often used to sleep, looking up at them. But there was also a new addition next to her, lying next to a tree in the garden and behind the place that Kiki usually used as a bed. The two men held their breaths, seeing the incredible scene before them. The cat appeared to be lying down on something as if protecting it or hiding it. At first, they weren't sure what it was and why the cat didn't move, but when the men got closer to Kiki, they saw something terrible. Their jaws dropped. What was going on? How could this happen in the capital of Norway? The two men wondered while thinking about what to do. Before long, a few other people from the neighborhood joined in. Everyone was holding their heads in disbelief. But no matter what, they knew they had to do something. While one person tried to get closer to the cat, another called the authorities. This was definitely beyond them. The family cat destroyed the stereotype that felines are distant and cold animals by caring for an abandoned child when it needed it the most. Well, it seems that feline friends aren't any less curious than humans. One particular cat surprised everyone when her instinctive nature found her in an unlikely position. After discovering a baby out in the cold, this cat did something unexpected that will forever go down in history. Under the cat, there was a baby. Sam was overwhelmed and had no idea what was going on, especially as Kiki appeared to be protecting the baby that seemed to have been abandoned there and was clearly distressed for some reason. Kiki heard the baby crying and decided to take responsibility for the abandoned child. Instead of hissing at or scaring him, she decided to look after the baby as if it were her own and make sure that he was okay. Not only did she lay down next to the newborn and keep him warm, but her presence also seemed to soothe the child as it didn't seem to be crying. Sam and everyone there were utterly shocked and couldn't believe the sight in front of them. Sam was incredibly overwhelmed and had no idea what to do at first. It wasn't until he really looked at the situation that he realized Kiki had actually been keeping the baby warm for hours and trying to get the attention of the people around her. Amazingly, Kiki had been able to shield the young child from the harsh conditions outside, and she may have even saved the baby's life. While those around Kiki were incredibly impressed with her and her life-saving act, they were also worried about the child. Was he okay? How long had he been there? Where were his parents? Sam could see that the baby was incredibly young and vulnerable. Something needed to be done soon. Kiki, the cat, had called for help and the people who were at the scene needed to as well. It was time to take action. So they decided to call the police and the paramedics. They knew that the authorities would know what to do with the abandoned child, but also wanted to ensure that the baby was healthy. However, the people didn't anticipate that Kiki would be quite so protective of the baby. In fact, Kiki did not want the baby to leave her side. She had grown incredibly fond of the infant and tried to ensure it wouldn't be harmed. Because of this, Kiki followed the baby wherever it was taken. When paramedics took the child to the ambulance to give him a checkup, Kiki followed closely behind. Not only this, but she also meowed at the ambulance until she saw the baby with her own eyes. The baby was eventually taken to the hospital for a checkup. A spokesperson for the local hospital later reported to a news agency and confirmed that the baby boy was doing fine and had no injuries in any way from his ordeal.